Okay, so I wanted to address the issue of brightness control in laptops. And to clarify, I just want to get it right out of the way at the very beginning. I'm talking specifically about laptops with AMD CPUs or APU because laptops basically have those CPUs which support both video and obviously the computing tasks, the CPU part. So essentially, you can sort of call it an APU. So the problem with my laptop, and which I will show you the specifications, although it does not really matter as long as it's uh, a laptop with an AMD CPU. So essentially, I have a Victus and I have a Ryzen 5 5600H APU, NVIDIA GPU RTX 3050. I don't think this matters. What matters is this right here. All right. So basically, as far as I know, the brightness is wired to your the the GPU that comes the graphics that comes integrated with your CPU, right? So it's not like it has got anything to do with the dedicated GPU. Fine. So the brightness is essentially totally dependent on uh, whatever uh, processor it is wired to, as far as I know, in case of laptops at least. And I'll tell you why I think that. All of this again is just an assumption from my part. And before diving into the solution, essentially what was happening is right now, I don't know if you can see it in the screen recording or not, but brightness is reducing, and if I increase it, it indeed is increasing. But before I made a modification to my kernel parameters, it was not the case. It was basically stuck at 100% brightness, and reducing it had basically no effect. So the slider would go down, but the brightness won't. But now it's not the case anymore after I made a subtle change. And I'll tell you what change exactly I made. So first of all, you need to know which bootloader you are using. So for my case, I'm using Grub, and if you are a beginner Linux user and you do not have any idea about what I'm talking about, then most probably you are using the default bootloader that ships with your distribution, which in most of the cases is Grub, but it can vary. Okay, because some systems do use systemd as their boot, and it's not like Grub and systemd are the only two bootloaders that exist. There are plenty of bootloaders. You'll just have to figure out which one you are using, and you'll have to change your kernel parameters according to the configuration file of the bootloader that you're using to boot your operating system. Okay, so I know that sounds a lot, but it's really easy. Essentially, as I said, I'm using Grub. So what I'll do is I'll upload the Grub config, and I mean I have already updated it, but I'll show you the changes. So sudo vim etc default grub, and remember to use sudo because obviously it requires root privileges whenever you are editing any file that's a system file or in the root directory. And this line right here is what made all the difference. So earlier this highlighted portion, it was not there before I made any modifications, but after I added this line, and be very careful where you are adding it, grub cmd line linux default, this is where you need to add this parameter. And essentially what it does is, honestly I don't know, I asked ChatGPT and it says that it essentially disables some auto brightness adjustment ability, something like that. I don't know, I don't have any idea, but essentially setting this parameter to 0, like this, adding this entire line, setting amd.backlight is as 0 made all the difference, and I was able to have my brightness back again. And it's a kernel parameter, so basically whenever your operating system is loading, kernel is loading, the bootloader is loading the kernel into place, this parameter is respected because I'm using grub to boot, and grub config has this, and when I boot into my system, my brightness works. So essentially this is for AMD APU CPU, whatever you call it. I don't know if Intel users face the same problem or not. I think their solution will be something along these lines, but I'm not exactly sure what, instead of AMD, what it will be called. But for AMD users, you can rest assured this is what you need to do. And I'll also show you some sources, right? So this guy posted this 2 years ago, the solution to brightness issue for AMD APU, and he says the same thing, which is adding this. And now this guy was also using grub, so he had to edit the grub config file. But then again, as I said, if you're using anything other than grub like systemd, you should figure that out. You should basically Google how to add kernel parameters to systemd or whatever bootloader you're using. So there's also an ArchWiki article that explains this. So this is for systemd, adding kernel parameters with systemd boot. You can check this out, or you can simply ask ChatGPT. Like these days, these LLMs have gotten really good. So what is the equivalent of adding AMD GPU dot backlight equals 0 in grub? In grub to systemd. I don't know if my English is correct or not, but don't worry, LLMs are smart. So essentially what it's saying is this will basically check whether you're using systemd or not. And okay, so if you're using systemd, then you need to modify this file, and then you need to also one more thing which I forgot is after you have done that, you have to update your grub. So sudo update grub, and that is essentially the equivalent of doing whatever this is doing. It's essentially regenerating the reboot files, right? So yeah, that's pretty much it. And let me just ask when I'm, you know what, since I'm here, I'll just ask it in a better way. Like, tell me the exact steps assuming I'm using systemd and I want to add AMD GPU backlight equals 0 to kernel parameter. Let's see. And it's again asking me to confirm. It's kind of annoying if you ask me. Okay, so you need to go there, you need to run ls, and depending on what distribution you're using, you will see something.conf. Then you'll have to open that, and you'll see something like this. And okay, so this is where you will be pasting the kernel parameter, which is options, and then just simply yank it right there, and then you can just save and exit and reboot your system. And I don't know why it did not ask to regenerate the thingy, but I think you'll have to do this too before you reboot. And then you can reboot your system, and if you're right, like if this he like ChatGPT did indeed say to regenerate the config file, but Yeah, so just add this and then reboot and then regenerate your configuration files according to whatever bootloader you're using. Then reboot your system and then check if your brightness is responding or not to your brightness control. So that is pretty much it. I have been facing this issue for quite some time. Like eventually I just gave up and decided that it's not bothering me all that much, so I'll just let it be stuck at 100% brightness for like the rest of the time. But then I just had that itch within myself to actually figure out why this was happening, and well, I figured it out after a lot of hassle, but yes, I did. And thanks to this guy, I it's random comments like these on Reddit that have been posted years ago, and like you see the solution and you apply it and it works and you're happy. So yeah, props to the Reddit users. Okay, fine. So that was pretty much it. I don't think there's much more to it. And yes, thank you for watching this video. I hope it was helpful to those users who were facing brightness issues with their laptop with AMD APUs. And thank you.